Welcome to the Ridgemont podcast. I'm John Wallace, Managing Director of Ridgemont, a specialist construction and real estate law firm. And I'm sitting here with Steve Edge of Steve Edge Design. He's the creative director there, and they're a global branding and digital design agency. Good morning, Steve.
Morning, John.
How are you today?
It's a good day, but every day is a good day. And I feel the dampness leaving the atmosphere. So luckily that cold, dank weather we've been having seems to be disappearing. So for me, and bring on the dry, I can get out on my motorbikes. We can go to our cabin. I can make outdoor fires and start to chill again.
Right, we're going to talk about that later, actually, because I find you absolutely fascinating in terms of all of the things that you're interested in. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But first, as is usual on this podcast, we're going to talk about your career to date, starting way back when you were at school.
Funny enough, well, that's a good question, John. As you know, maybe you didn't know that I never went to school. The key was that I was very lucky. At 4 years old, two things happened to me. One, I discovered glitter, magic markers and plastic scissors. And the other thing was that I was luckily sent back from school, being that this child cannot be educated because of the conditions that I have. In those days, obviously, severe dyslexia, OCD, and all those other things, they didn't know they existed. But luckily for me, my father had a friend who married a woman from New Zealand, and she saw me as a 4-year-old and said, this child had got this, and that, and therefore I can teach Steve, which was a result because her husband was in charge of IPC magazines. He had 3 publications that he loved most of all, called Practical Boat Builder, Practical Woodworker, and Practical Homeowner. And what happened was, the interesting point of that was that in the home that I was taught as a 4-year-old, he had a studio and a workshop in the house. Because there was no CGIs, no Apple Macs, if he was going to design and build and make one of the stories that he was creating for this publication would be how to build a mirror dinghy.
Yep.
You would have to design, make it, create it, and then produce flat artwork, and it was all done in this house. So I do my studies in the morning with Valerie, and in the afternoon go and help Dennis in the workshop studio and make stuff.
Amazing, especially being that young. Going back to your mum and dad days, so you're back then, your parents must have been quite open-minded to the fact that there was nothing wrong with you. You were just different, and we needed to work out a way to get you educated.
That's a very good point, John. Absolutely. What happened was, obviously, my father and my mother were creative.
What did they do?
Well, my dad had to look after his sons, us 3, and therefore he sculpted, painted, but also he had to pay the bills. No bursaries, none of that in those days. So he was a very charming chap that loved people. And of course, coming from this manor in the east here, he worked in Smithfield Meat Market.
Oh, right.
So he worked in the meat market full of all these amazing characters, and it was a fabulous place to be.
Well, it's not far from our office, actually. It's still an amazing place in the morning. I mean, it's quite a strong smell first thing, but...
Absolutely. I mean, it truly is. And my father would be still happy today if he was alive that it's still there. Obviously, we have the London Museum moving in to that space, which I think is a great space, considering it's one of the oldest markets in the world, where it's been there since 800. So
it's incredible. It'd be a real shame if they develop it wider than that.
Absolutely, it's got amazing history, and above all else, it's, as a young man, when we used to go clubbing, my dad worked nights, so I always used to rock up and see him about 3 o'clock in the morning and have a good old cup of tea and a chat.
Yeah,
that he was all right. So yeah, for me, it's incredibly sentimental. It's a historic place. I know you can't see, but on the wall there, it's a biography of me as one of my sons painted. And then one of the big buildings there is Smithfield Meat Market.
Yeah, I can see it. So you touched on your dyslexia. What does dyslexia mean to you?
Dyslexia, to me, has been a great advantage. That's what it means to me. The key for my dyslexia was that a word can go in but it means nothing together. So I've never read a book in my life because, one, it doesn't work. It just does not go in, and therefore it's incredibly difficult. Luckily for me, I was brought up very safe, with my father giving me my freedom to be able to be taught by a woman who was an expert on learning difficulties, but also given the freedom to find the passion that I like.
Yeah.
Now, luckily for me, I found that passion, as I said earlier on, and it truly is today. I still walk into my studio every day with my glitter magic markers and plastic scissors, and because of that freedom, it gave me my confidence, which also allowed me, because if you can't read a book, that means you can't particularly read many signs, and therefore I've always managed to be able to communicate with people. One, I love people. I like people.
Yeah.
Usually people like me. And for that reason, I always tell people when I'm in dangerous situations, i.e. a railway station, that I don't want to get on the wrong train. So the first person I come to, I say, excuse me, can you help me? I'm dyslexic. Now, it's amazing. They kind of think you're kind of disabled. They grab your arm. They're going to walk me to the train, get me on it, put me on the chair, and tell everybody on the train that this man is getting off at Dorking, which actually is perfect. So for me, I can relax, I can chill. I know I'm not going to get mixed up. And someone always taps me on my shoulder and goes, sir.
It's amazing how kind people are. So I'm a bit colourblind. I can't tell the difference between green, grey, blue, mainly. And so when I go clothes shopping, I have to ask the assistant, can you pick the colours for me so they match? Because I can't do it myself. And it's a similar thing. You're opening up yourself to other people and they're helping you. It's great.
Well, exactly. And I think that energy comes from you, John, as well. You know, it's about that you give a 100% open honesty. And I think that people pick up on that.
Yeah.
And I think they are kind. The majority of people are kind, are amazing, are nice, do want to help one another. And, you know, we're in a mad world, as we know, full of terrible, terrible things. But for me, mankind is amazing.
Does your dyslexia give you, and there's no pun intended, a creative edge?
It's very good. Pun, it does. It does give me a creative edge. It always has done. We see things in a very different light. My wife Sylvie has always said, because of not reading books, she loves how I get all my information osmosis, from listening to conversations, from listening to podcasts, from listening to just conversations in restaurants.
Are you purposefully doing that because you know that you can't pick it up from reading?
No, I don't. I don't do it at all. I live in my own bubble. I'm like a butterfly. I love it. I just live my life bombing around here, there, and everywhere, and all the information comes to me. And so I use what I find as fuel. So, you know, that's why definitely for me, being dyslexic has helped me in a sense of being in the creative industry, without doubt.
Okay, so going back in time again, at 15 years old, you won the National Young Artist of the Year award.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Came about because although I still never went to school, I had to go to school at 13 for a couple of years because of legal reasons. And so I went to a school, lived in the art department, and the head of art entered me in for this competition, European Artist of the Year. And luckily I won it. And that was a big time for me, because then I was asked to go and would I like to work on the Muppet Show and do some work on sets and things like that. And that was fantastic.
I mean, you say luckily that you won it. I mean, you won it because you were the best in the competition. And I just caught you saying that. Do you think you underplay how good you are?
You know, it's very interesting. It's a very interesting question, John. I'm very proud of what we do and what I do, and the clients that we work with, and the stories we tell, and the brands that we create. That I know we're very, very good, and that I bring a true difference to whatever we touch. But yeah, I think, you know, growing up in a modest household, that you're taught to be modest.
So, after your success in the awards, which wasn't lucky. You go on to work with Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, it must have been amazing at what, in your late teens, early 20s, was that?
I was 17 when I worked on Star Wars, and then Empire Strikes Back, and then on Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was interesting with Raiders, here in London, we grew up with all sorts of animals. My dad loved animals. He swapped a BSA Bantam motorbike for a chimpanzee called Primo, and that was a fabulous pet.
Where did you keep the chimpanzee?
In the home. It just lived in the home with us, like a dog. But it kind of ate with us at the table.
I mean, it's dangerous, a chimpanzee, right?
They can be.
Yeah.
They can be. As they get older, they can become, extremely strong and dangerous and grumpy. But no, my dad was amazing with animals, and we were all amazing with animals because we were surrounded by snakes, we were surrounded by lizards, we were surrounded by all sorts of...
The chimpanzee sat at the kitchen table with you?
Yes, we would have... My grandmother lived with us for a while, and she would... a party piece was after the dinner. She would pass a packet of sweets around, and Primo would wait nobly for the packet to come to him. And as the packet would come, he would put his big hand out, and everybody would go, "It's amazing, it's amazing." Primo would look in the packet boss-eyed, grab one of these sweets, put the packet down very delicately, get hold of the other end of the wrapper, and on cue, undo the sweet, get the sweet, throw the sweet away, and eat the wrapper in front of everybody to their amusement. But yeah, he was wonderful. The milkman was shit scared of the Primo, the chimpanzee. He would hear the milk float coming out every morning at 6 o'clock. We had a garden wall. He used to bound out off the garden wall on top of the milk float, rock the milk float with all the bottles clanging, and the milkman going, "Get that chimp off my..." So yeah, it was wonderful. And all the neighbours absolutely were so amazingly proud of having a chimp in their neighbourhood, and that they all knew Primo, and that, even when Primo would go a bit bonkers sometimes, climb up the drain pipe to the roof and start lobbing all the tiles off the roof into the street, they would all be ducking and diving. "Oh, well, Primo nearly got me there." Unlike today, I'm sure people suing you for all that shit.
I mean, it sounds like an amazing house to grow up in. Creative, liberal, open-minded, all those things.
Yeah, it was, John. It was absolutely amazing. My dad was a truly amazing man. He was incredibly creative. Whatever he turned his hand to, he was fabulous at. Whether it was photography, whether it was painting, whether it was making furniture, whether it was tying flies, because we've always fished in the family. We always had all sorts of amazing materials around the house.
Yeah.
And that was a great advantage, so that if I ever wanted to build, make, create, we always had the materials at hand.
Yeah, one opportunity. Okay, so you've been working on the films, and then at some stage you start working with corporate brands like Fortnum & Mason, Cartier, Skanska. When does that happen?
So when I was working on Raiders, it was fantastic. It was by the way, that was my monkey on Raiders as well. That was a pet capuchin that I had.
What, in the film?
Yes, in the film. Yeah. I'll have to show you some pictures of the monkey.
Yeah.
And then, ironically, the stunt woman would not go in the snake pit. So they come and got me. Spielberg says, "Steve, would you shave your legs? Would you wear the party dress?" So when you see that scene in Raiders of the Lost...
You're joking me.
I shall show you some pictures in a minute. Me standing in the snake pit with Indiana in the Well of Souls, and they're my legs.
Well, I didn't expect to hear that today. So why did you pivot to brands?
Because when I finished the end of Raiders, we finished the film, I said to Spielberg and Lucas that, look, they were saying we're going to work on our films, and I said, well, look, you guys have taught me the best thing of all. I've always loved brands. I've always bought into brands. And I said that you guys, for me, have created the world's best stories. You created the best stories. And for me, I don't think brands are doing it as well as you guys, in the sense of telling that amazing story.
Yeah.
And so I said, because of my condition, I said, there's far too much information out there. Websites, any document, any brochure, any form of information is too much. It overloads even people that can read, let alone there's a big opportunity that's lost with people with learning difficulties like Richard Branson. You'd like him as your customer, that you're not communicating to everybody. So I said, I've created a formula is going to create the amazing story, find something that is authentic and create those foundations of who you are and what you are with that story and communicate it. Instead of being informational, we will create inspirational. It will be inspirational, and also create a thing called lateralism, which I created, which was instead of, something that's literal, I will create lateral. Because if you can create inspirational instead of informational, that people can read what you're giving them and you're spoon feeding that stuff that they want, it's a no-brainer. But secondly, if with being lateral is to feed people components in their head that they create their own wow. And that's the answer.
So what year was this when you were first talking about this stuff?
Like early 80s.
And I'm thinking about, so websites didn't exist back then?
No, they didn't, but I'm using that as an example.
Right, okay.
There was brochures, there was obviously mail shots, there was communication. But all I'm saying is there's always been too much information.
Yeah, I get that. And so going back to the early 80s, all of that marketing material would have been, I'd call it kind of brochure material. So these are our services, this is what we do, this is our telephone number, call us. And so what you were saying at the time was revolutionary, wasn't it? Because no one was doing that.
No one was doing it because, like I said, it was always too literal and too, like I said, almost, you want to slit your wrists. So for me, it was always creating communication that was simple for everybody and wow. And the key to wow is, look, people buy Vogue magazines not particularly to read it, to look at beautiful clothes, beautiful fashion, beautiful photography. And for me, brands are no different. In other words, you want to create a brand that's memorable, that's beautiful. Above all else, it has to be easy to use. And it's something that people talk about.
So that gives you the opportunity to springboard, and you set up Steve Edge Design in 1985. And fast forward to 2024, we're sitting here in your Hoxton offices. How many are in the team now?
5.
It obviously took a lot of hard work to get here over a long period of time. And I think the most interesting question that we ask every entrepreneur on this podcast is, why? Why did you feel the need to do it? Why do you continually feel the need to do it, to show up, to keep growing, keep moving?
It's a really good question. A lot of people ask me that. And actually, I can't say that I had any particular strategy around it. It wasn't a big idea that I wanted to own a company and have a company. All I wanted to do, like I've always said, is create art, to come up with things that don't exist, make companies successful, and to bring a different narrative and story to everything that we touch. And because of that, I started off by myself. And then Cartier came and Wix Building Supplies came and everybody came. And then I needed an assistant. So I didn't think I wanted a company, but all I had to do was needed some help. So I got myself an assistant, and then I get myself another assistant, and then I got another assistant. So I wasn't actually aiming to have a company as such. I'm just passionate about what I do. And that's how it grew. So eventually we ended up with this fabulous company, creative agency that's globally known, that we're given, all sorts of amazing projects. We never know what we're going to get given. Because of my condition, you can imagine I can't sit still for that long. Luckily, my team deal with all meetings where they know I could get up and leave the room for a few minutes.
Yeah.
My team handle all my emails and organize all that stuff. But it was for me 2 things. One, I'm passionate about beautiful, amazing communication for everybody, but to create companies that are more successful than others.
Mm-hmm.
So when we brand someone, we want them to be above the parapet of all their competition. We will bring difference, true difference, because everybody says they're different. And they are. I believe they believe they're different. You know, ironically, even when we've branded law firms, you know, from Gately's to Pitman's, when they say to us, you know, I say, so tell me about your business. And they always go,
all law firms say they're commercial, and pretty much none of them are.
But so it's always interesting for us to find that true difference. But above all else, you know, like I said, passionate about what we do. Again, going back to proud of what we do, but also, you know, companies come to me to give them their trust for us to keep them moving forwards to become more successful themselves.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle that you've had to overcome in business?
The biggest obstacle you have to overcome in business, in creativity and branding, is that when I go into the boardroom, they give me a blank sheet of paper to help because they've called me in. And when I put something on it, they all become fucking experts all of a sudden. So the key that I love is that you call me in to brand it. And here we have an example of I walk in the boardroom with what they should be doing, holding their hands, talking about the process of branding, and then everybody becomes an expert. It's usually the financial director, funny enough, the one who's paying the Stanford Hill, who said, I don't like it. And so, of course, so tell me why you don't like it. Well, they can't.
And so what do you do then? Do you insist that your design is followed, or does it end up getting diluted with their conservatism?
We don't. But what we do, we bring 3 formulas to the table. You know, 3 logo ideas, typographic ideas. Remember, the color palette is very important with a brand. It's the first thing you see before you read or notice anything. You can't own one color. You can own 2 colors. You can't own one. So all that is a kind of a mix and match system. But also, there's a lot of people maybe sometimes in corporate boardrooms have never been through a rebrand or a brand process. So therefore, they're slightly nervous. They have no idea what to expect. So it's down to us and me to really wipe their brows, tell them the reasons why, because we don't just create pretty picture. It's not a pretty picture, everything. Because if you create a pretty picture, you've seen it many times, the dodgy logo on a business card.
Yeah.
It works on a business card, but you try and reduce it to go onto a cufflink, project it on the side of the wall, becomes a muddy splodge. So for us, it's about creating everything that is literally, we've gone through all the processes of working through stuff that works and stuff that doesn't work. So we bring back, you know, there's thousands of concepts that no one sees till we get to the things that work. So we're actually only showing them the things that work so we can explain the reasons why these work.
Yeah, got you. Okay, final question about you, and then we're going to move on to corporate and personal branding is, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
It's a good question. You know, it's difficult, John. I mean, for me, I think, you know, I was very lucky. I was brought up with no money. So when you're brought up with no money, you don't need money. You become creative in the way to live. You find things to make. You find hobbies that cost nothing. For me, fishing, I fished all the canals, all the ponds. I had lots of empty cornflake boxes to make things out of and glitter. So, you know, I was a free spirit, and I'm still a free spirit. I mean, you know, look, I'm very fortunate. You know, if we have, you know, I have lunches every day with clients, and you know, but for me, you know, baked beans on toast is just as delicious. Don't think one is better than the other.
Yeah.
So that's how I've been brought up. But if we're talking about, you know, if I was to say something to a 20-year-old, is that believe in yourself, find that thing that you really love to do, and fuck up. You have to fuck up, because if you don't, you're never going to find that real amazing thing that you're going to try and search for, because you can't be good at anything if you don't.
No, I completely get that. Right. On to corporate branding. And I've nicked this from your website. It talks about, I guess, the difference between when rebranding a kind of revolution and incrementalism. And for your clients, is it always revolution or is it facts?
No, No, it's a good point. What happens, John, is depending on the brand, depending on the client, depending on the company. So when it comes to old brands, very old brands, we've branded many old brands, from working with Fortnum and Mason, Garrard's, 1735, Lot Hats, 1676. We're just working with the Guild of Goldsmiths, working with them, and that 700-year-old rebrand.
Wow.
So, what you have to remember is that is an evolution.
Yeah.
But you get the evolution of the mark, because, of course, the mark has been there for many years, and, you have to move it into the 21st century, but it's an evolution. However, what's the difference of revolution is the brand story around it.
Yes.
So you want to bring a real revolution to the company using an evolution of branding and their mark and where they've come from, because you don't want to upset clients because they won't recognize it anymore, or it would be misinterpreted. But for us is to create that wow around the brand story, everything that goes around that mark.
So that leads on to my next point, which is the power of story. And I've seen you use it when you speak about yourself. I was at an event recently that called PropNet that Adair put on, and you spoke there. And you tell your story because it means something to your brand. And I guess it's the same for corporates. Totally. I mean, the key to it is that, there's a lot of things about companies, and there's a lot of things about people. And what you've just said is that usually when I do my spiel, depending on, whether it's a TED talk, whether it's talking to you guys, the answer is that people come up and go, Steve, I wish I had a good story to tell. I wish I could talk. And I say, you do. What people don't realize is they've all got their own treasure. They've all got their own story to tell. All companies have their own story to tell, but it's the way you tell it. Yeah.
And that's key to something that's creating a memorable, interesting, exciting story. Because remember, if it's a great story, someone will tell someone else.
Yes.
If it's a poor story, someone will keep stuff with it. So the key to it is to create wow, tell the great story, and people want to tell someone else.
And something I wanted to talk about actually is your business cards. So I saw you on the street at Mippin, and you handed me one of your business cards, and I looked at it, and it's gold on the outside, gold and black, and it opens up, which is unusual for a business card. And obviously it's got all your contact details, but it's got a photo of you holding a massive fish. Why have you got a photo of you holding a massive fish on your business card?
Well, because I'm proud of catching that fish. And two, people again will talk about that story of that particular fish, because, if you're going to give a business card, you don't want anybody to bin it. One, it costs money, and two, you're giving out your card so that they will remember you, and not only remember you a few weeks later, but want to hang on to it. Now, if you're going to create a 24-karat gold card with a beautiful inside with it, which is this new material from G.F. Smith called Heart Attack, because it's got this kind of bright pink with glitter in it, and then, like I say, give yourself a nice title, which I have in that card.
Well, you call yourself Prophet, Madman, Wanderer.
Well, exactly. Fun. What people don't realize is in business, you've got to have fun. Show me a company that has fun, and we know amazing work comes from it. And that's what people want, to create a fantastic brand, a fantastic company. You've got to have fun. And of course, because of my passion is fly fishing. It's a fish I caught in Patagonia. It was a 75-pound king salmon on the fly. So it was actually a bit of a fight, a bit of a struggle. But at the end of the day, I landed it.
Oh, it's the size of a child.
I know, mate. I took the picture. Well, a friend of mine took the picture, and then we returned the fish. All my fish go back in the water. We must never take fish again.
Well, actually, my 8-year-old son was rifling through the business cards that I had received at MIPIM, and he picked your one out. And he was like, wow, can I take it into school for show and tell on Friday? He said.
Wow, lovely.
I said, no, I don't want to lose it. It needs to be seen. How has corporate branding changed as a result of people working from home?
That's a very interesting.
So I'm thinking in particular, for example, and again, I've nicked this from your website, is that when you walk into an office, you see the imagery on the walls, the people in reception, you walk up to the meeting room, the wood panel, whatever. Whereas on Teams, all you see is a blurred background. Is that a problem for companies?
Yeah. Sorry, it used to be, John. I mean, when COVID happened, we all knew what happened. Everybody then had to stay indoors. And if the people that could work from home, they worked from home. So, of course, all of a sudden there was this communication that was going on. Everybody on a laptop talking to each other. And straight away, it was that I was writing papers, well, obviously talking papers, people was writing it for me. But we have, the example of exactly that. Where was the brand going to go? Where was how was you going to express who you are and what you are by, as you said, a blurred out background sitting on a computer, whereas before you would come into an office, you would come into a studio, and you would have that environment and that energy and people and touchy-feely and the personality there immediately of who you are and what you are. Incredibly, over the years, that's now been going on 4 years of people working from home, hybrid working, that actually it's become a given. And I think the mind has changed a lot. I mean, the key to it is obviously we still have to have our Teams calls. A lot of clients still now, we're presenting, we're showing work on Teams calls, which is, again, I would never have thought that it would have worked, but it works incredibly well. The process is far quicker because, as we always knew, to try and get a meeting to go to Milan with 20 people with all different diaries at different times, it was impossible. It would take 4 or 5 months to get there. Now, the whole concept is of us presenting to a board, which we know we could probably say next week, and everybody go, yeah, I can make that. So it's an incredible way. So actually, for me, it's improved business dramatically in the sense of being more effective. The process of starting from branding someone to the finish of the branding, but also I truly believe now that it's amazing how people get used to that.
Yeah,
and therefore, that thing about the proud corporate entrance with the big logo stuck on the wall, it's not so important anymore. But it's obviously what comes out of the company is more important. In other words, that now what you do is who you are and what you are.
Be a doer, not a shower or something. I don't know. You might have to edit that out. Are there any specific challenges for companies from a branding perspective in the real estate / construction sector?
I think, look, when I got involved in, I think, the construction industry, real estate industry, probably 30 years ago, it was almost like everything was done on the back of a fag packet. Hoardings was left really empty. There was never that kind of, now if we look at, it's almost, works of art.
Yeah, they're beautiful now, right?
Fantastic. And, the amount of hoarding that you walk around London and see. So, that's changed dramatically. I think people take it more seriously now. I think in the day when we were looking at construction companies, demolition companies, they wouldn't justify anything to do with the cost of how much a brand would cost and a logo would cost, because they would all have probably done it themselves, as I said originally. Yeah. So now I think it's far more, as we know, people get educated in the sense of, what's around them, looking at their competitors. And now we see, these super construction developer brands. We work with all the brands from rebranding the 150th year anniversary of Sir Robert McAlpine, working on all these other amazing brands with McLaren, with Waits, with Wilmot Dixon, with Kia Group. We've worked with all them, and actually they're all very proud of their brands, use it very wisely, and fly their flag.
Okay, we're going to move on to personal branding now. And as you were talking there, I was trying to think how I was going to put this without being rude. I think that you probably have the clearest personal branding I've ever seen on anyone. But everyone has a personal brand, right? How do people show who they are, and should they not be afraid to do so?
It's a very good point, because that's the problem, what you just said, afraid to do so. Because the only way that you can, let's talk about me just for a second on this issue.
Do you want to describe what you're wearing first?
Well, I'm wearing a suit that I designed, and it's pink moons and satellites and planets that has been printed on a kind of a royal blue background, which is a very nice. But
it's cool.
Thank you. But it's one of my tamer suits, to tell you the truth. If you look at my Instagram, Steve Edge Instagram, you can see usually probably every day of the week that I'll be wearing one of these suits that you'll see on Instagram. Sorry, but going back to that, and why I say talking about me is that you have to be comfortable in your own skin. Now, it's not like people go, wow, you could wear it, well, I could wear it. Well, absolutely, I agree. You couldn't, because, people think, they go, are you wearing that just for show? And I'm not. You know what? I'm a fucking clown. I put a clown outfit on just so that I can, get attention. Well, it's not true. You couldn't do it. You couldn't go out every day or wear something you wouldn't want to just for the sake of that. So when it comes to personal branding, a lot of people say to me, Steve, I'd love to wear what you're wearing. And I say, well, look, you can. You just have to find something that you're really comfortable with. And then when it's in your cup, you feel comfortable, then all of a sudden it becomes natural and you'll have your own brand.
Yeah. Is it okay to be grey?
That's a good, that's so wonderful, John. For me, no. But yes, of course, I think it is okay to be grey, as long as you're not with all the other great people around you, because then you're not going to stick out.
Yeah. Now, having your own suit printed, designed, doesn't come cheap. So I'm thinking back to when you were 17, 18, 19, 20, and you were skinned. You couldn't have had those clothes made back then. Did you find a way to express yourself?
Well, what happened when I was 5 years old, my mother bought me a sewing machine. So once I had my sewing machine at 5, because I was remember I started using my hands at 4 years old in the workshop and in the studio with Dennis, I soon picked it up. Now, the great thing about having a sewing machine was that all my neighbours knew that I was like the frilly child of wearing colourful things and making things, that they gave me all their curtains. So I would make my own dresses. Trousers were difficult to put in a zip.
Yeah.
When you're 5 years old, it was definitely beyond me. But to make little long dresses to the ground, which, one, I loved because I loved the colour. Two, I was allowed to wear them on several fronts. One was that I was in this house where I was free, little blonde skinny kid, bare feet, because I was allowed to not wear shoes because I enjoyed not wearing shoes. And live in this house was one thing. But also I remember when I went outside the house, in East London or wherever we were, that because my father worked in Smithfield Meat Market, I was Edgy's son. And the whole of Smithfield Meat Market would look after this little weird child that normally would have had the piss taken out and mortified by comments, but I never had that. So, yeah, I was allowed to be free. So what happened was, John, the answer was I'd made my own clothes at 5. By the time I was 15, 16, 17, I could make everything that I wanted. So actually, yeah, no money, but I was very inventive in being given fabrics and making clothes.
And we've spoken about how you use your story and how you dress. Was that personal branding important when you're on your way up?
The answer is yes, but I didn't know it because, as I said earlier on, I wore what I wanted to because I enjoyed wearing colour. I enjoyed making my own clothes. And actually, because it was what you've said earlier on about grey, it was the opposite of grey.
Yeah.
And therefore, people would always comment and talk and also remember me. And when they remember you, that's no bad thing. But also, it's become quite difficult sometimes because of because I'm friendly, I like people, I like spontaneity, that when somebody meets me for the first time, they usually become my best friend. And then when they go off, usually, no disrespect, in their grey suit, in a crowd, they'll recognise me again because obviously of what I wear in.
Yeah.
But it's very difficult then to remember who they are. So you have to be good at blagging it. and try and find out where did we last meet. But, oh yeah, of course, so yeah, it's an
occupational hazard. Final question on this then is, does your personal branding or anyone's personal branding stop at your front door? So when you're at home, do you act, dress, behave any differently to what?
That's what I'm saying. I've always dressed for a party every day. The party comes to me. I've always worn colour. With all my 5 children, you can ask any of them. I'm always dressed the same, always. Whether I'm, climbing mountains because I'm a mountaineer as well, or whether I'm fishing in the middle of nowhere, I'm always wearing colourful, flowery outfits. And of course, had funny conversations when I meet other fishermen from around the world. They've gone to me, oh man, you're not going to catch anything with that on. So, trust me, watch the day. I catch more fish usually than anyone else. And the reason is that these people that wear camouflage stuff and greens and browns because they think the fish can't see them, trust me, a wild trout, seeing a tree move is far more spooky than a bunch of beautiful flowers blowing in the wind. And that's what happened.
The evidence of how good you are at fishing is in your business card. Steve, thanks for joining us. Steve Edge is creative director of Steve. Let's do that again. Steve Edge is creative director of Steve Edge Design, a global branding and digital design agency. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then email us at contact@ridgemont.co and we will add you to our newsletter so that you can see when the next podcast is available. Steve Edge is creative director of Steve Edge Design, a global branding and digital design agency. If you've enjoyed this podcast, then email us at contact@ridgemont.co and we will add you to our newsletter so you can see when the next podcast is available.